Capitalism, the idea of free markets and of free individuals in a system of government where the government protects property rights but basically leaves people alone. Capitalism, to the extent that it has been tried, has been a massive, unbelievable success story. It's stunning how well capitalism has performed over the last 200 plus years. But this is the frustration. In spite of that, capitalism is very unpopular in the West today. Socialism is on the rise. Among young people at American universities, in British universities, in mainland Europe, most young people identify themselves as leaning towards socialism. And the history of socialism is also pretty clear over the last 200 years. Everywhere it's tried, to the extent that it is tried, it fails. It leads to starvation. You Ukrainians know about this, maybe better than anybody else on the planet. Or at least, if you remember, right? Memory fades, it turns out, in interesting ways. And if you're not sure, if you think this is just history, this is just the past, all you have to do right now is look at Venezuela. And I don't know how much Venezuela is in the news here, but in Venezuela, they are starving. There's not enough food to feed people. Babies are dying of malnutrition. There are no, this is one striking image you can think of, right? There are no cats and dogs in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela. Why? Because they've eaten them all. They've eaten their own pets because they have no food. The zoos have been emptied and all the animals have been eaten because there's not enough food. That's socialism. Always, everywhere, whenever it's practiced. And yet that's what's popular. And capitalism, which has led to prosperity and wealth and success, is denounced, is ridiculed. I mean, just to give you an illustration of the success of capitalism, what do you think the percentage of people who were poor 300 years was? Let's take Western Europe and America and places that are rich today. What was the percentage of people who lived, let's say, under $3 a day? I mean, in today's dollars, under $3 a day. How many people 300 years ago lived $300 a day or less? 80, what's that? 90. Yeah. About 95%. About 95%. This is, and I'm going to draw in the air, this is a graph of human income, or average wealth, over the last 10,000 years, right? Here we are 10,000 years ago, at about somewhere under $3 a day, right? It goes up and down a little bit. It gets a little bit better with Rome, maybe, and then it goes down during the Dark Ages, but it basically stays about the same for about 10,000 years. And then, out of nowhere, it goes like that. I mean, like that. It's not even exponential. It's kind of like a cliff. It goes straight up. And in Asia, you might say it continued like this a little bit longer, and then it went up like that. And it's still kind of pushing up. What happened? When does this happen? 1776 is a good date. Two things happened in 1776. Two things happened. The United States declares independence, but it's not so much the Declaration of Independence. It's the ideas that the Declaration of Independence represents. And the fact that these ideas are so popular that a whole country can be created based on those ideas. And we'll get to what those ideas are. And then a second thing happens in 1776. A book is published. A very famous book is published. Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations was published. First book really to articulate the case from an economics perspective for capitalism. Right? The first popular book to do that. The first book that had real influence. Both things happened in 1776. And the Industrial Revolution starts at around that period. Not on that date, but around. I think the first commercial application for the steam engine was invented in 1776 as well. So, you know, that really got things going in terms of the Industrial Revolution. But the important part of 1776 is the ideas. Certain ideas were identified during that period about individual freedom, about individual liberty, and about human reason and our capacity to think and understand and know the world that set people free. And since then, and basically created the environment for capitalism, capitalism meaning a system where individuals are free, where the government protects property rights but leaves people alone, and for a large part of the 19th century, that's what governments did. And as a consequence, bam, wealth was created like never in history before, nowhere close. And in Asia, it took them a little longer to figure this out. But about 1978, about a couple of years after Mao Zedong died, right, they said, okay, maybe this capitalism stuff works, and let's free up some places, you know, around Hong Kong and around some other places, and let's leave them alone and see what happens. And what happened was, boom, wealth was created. And Asia goes like this. And different dates. In India, it happened around 1991, where they gave up on socialism and they started to open up their economy. In South Korea, it happened in the late 70s, early 80s, when they gave up on the dictator and established a more free society. Taiwan, all of them like this. In Hong Kong, it happened even earlier. And I'll just give you one other illustration, because Hong Kong is such a great story. 70 years ago, 70, 80 years ago, Hong Kong. Anybody been to Hong Kong? All right, we got one. I suggest everybody try to go to Hong Kong once in your life. It's just stunning to see, right? Because 75 years ago, Hong Kong was a fishing village. There was nothing there. Maybe 10, 20,000 people on the whole thing. Now, you remember, Hong Kong is a rock. No oil, no natural gas, no gold, no silver, nothing, no natural resources. It's just a rock in the middle of nowhere. The southern part of China. The Chinese didn't even care that much about it, so they gave it to the British for 99 years, right? And the British liked it because it had a port. They could build a port around it. In the last 70 years, Hong Kong, which started out with like 20,000 people, today has 7.5 million people living on this rock. More skyscrapers than New York City. And a GDP per capita on a purchasing power parity, so you adjust for everything, just a little higher than America. So in 70 years, they created more wealth per capita than it took the United States 200 and something years to do. Okay. Why? How did they do it? Okay. And how did they get 7.5 million people? Immigrants. Everybody came from all over Asia, poor people. They got on boats and they rowed to get to Hong Kong. And why did they go there? What did Hong Kong have to offer? There were no welfare. There was no free health care. There was no free education. There was no free anything. It was all about opportunity. All they had in Hong Kong was freedom. And it wasn't even the freedom to vote. We talked about voting and democracy earlier. There's no democracy in Hong Kong. You don't get to vote. But they have a government. Luckily for them, it's a government that protects your free speech. It protects the right to contract. It protects property rights. It protects all of your rights as a human being. You just don't vote. And yet people flooded in. They escaped all the other countries around to get to Hong Kong. And today, on average, they're richer than Americans. Why? Because they had freedom. They had the protection of property rights, and they were left alone. Very little regulation, very little taxation, very little government involvement in what people did. They have a little bit of a safety net, very small compared to Western Europe or America or anywhere else, and you're left alone to do what you want. And again, poor people from all over the world came there because they had opportunity, and they did something with that opportunity. Capitalism works. Everywhere it's tried, in Asia, in Europe, even the countries that are most succeeding now in Africa, it's because they're adopting elements of capitalism. Now, just to be clear, I don't believe that any of these countries are, are basically purely capitalist, which is too bad, because I'm a purist. I would love to see a country become pure capitalist. But you can say this, and the empirical evidence is unequivocal. To the extent that you allow for freedom, to the extent that you allow for capitalism, to that extent, you are successful materially. To that extent, you create wealth. To that extent, standard of living goes up, child mortality goes down, life expectancy goes up. All of the good things that we want materially are achieved by freeing people up, by protecting property rights and contract law, and leaving people alone. So what's the marketplace about? Producers come into the marketplace for their own reasons. Consumers come into the marketplace for their own reasons. The marketplace is a place in which we pursue what? Mutual benefit, but nobody cares about the mutual benefit. What do you really care about? Your benefit. We go into the marketplace in pursuit of our own self-interest. We go to the marketplace to make our lives better. Capitalism is a system of self-interest. It's all about self-interested people doing the things that are good for them, not caring about the world, just doing what's good for them, and exchanging value for value in pursuit of your own self-interest. Capitalism is about selfishness. And this isn't a new observation. Adam Smith, in The Wealth of Nations, written in 1776, wrote, "The baker, when he bakes the bread, is not thinking about you. He doesn't care about you. The baker, when he bakes the bread, is trying to make a living for himself. Hopefully he enjoys baking bread. But he's trying to feed his family, and he's trying to make a living, and he's trying to further his life, he's trying to make his life better, and he knows there's a market for bread, and when you buy the bread, you don't care about the baker. You're not thinking, ooh, isn't this wonderful for the baker, right? Adam Smith writes about this. Capitalism is the system of self-interest. It's a system of selfishness. That's the essential core of what it's about. What do we think about being selfish? From a moral perspective, what did our mothers teach us about being self-interested and being selfish? Yeah, right. I don't know what they teach in Ukraine, but my mother was Jewish, right? And she taught me, think of yourself last. Think of other people first, right? What it means to be good and noble and virtuous and just and all the good stuff is to sacrifice. It's to be selfless. Thinking about yourself taints what you do. It makes it less than optimal from a moral perspective. That's what our mothers taught us. That's what our religious leaders teach us. That's what our philosophers teach us. Selfish means bad stuff. You're supposed to be selfless. Well, okay, but that's not capitalism. That's not capitalism. That's the opposite of capitalism. And in a conflict between economics, between wealth, and between values, between ethics, what do you think wins? Values, ethics, always. People don't vote their pocketbook. They don't vote what will make them richer. They vote what will make them feel good about themselves. And if they believe that capitalism equals selfishness and selfishness equals evil, then they will vote against evil. Versus socialism. Socialism is for sacrifice on a massive scale, right? It's for people doing what's good for other people, not what's good for themselves, supposedly, right? Socialism fits our morality perfectly. I'll give you an example. Think about Bill Gates, right? Bill Gates, what did he do? Microsoft, right? became the richest man in the world building Microsoft. How do you become the richest man in the world? If you create value for 10 people, you're not going to become a billionaire. The only way to become a billionaire is to create value for billions or hundreds of millions of people. That's one guaranteed way. And create so much value for them that they're willing to pay you more than what it cost you to produce. So every time I bought a Microsoft product, was I worse off or better off as a consequence? I was better off. Otherwise, I wouldn't have given him $100. I got more than $100 value from the Microsoft product. Otherwise, it turns out that if you actually do the math, you've gained millions of dollars from the Microsoft products. You can't imagine a world today without Microsoft, the interconnectedness, everything that Microsoft did for the world. Indeed, Microsoft changed the world. It made the world a better place. It allowed people to rise up from poverty more than any other business in human history. It created more value for humanity than any philanthropy, any charity that has ever done. More people have gotten opportunities because Microsoft and the technology it created than anything anybody's ever done in business or in charity or in philanthropy. Yet, what do we think about Bill Gates when he's at business? He's changed the world. He's made the world a better place. He's helped poor people. But we think about him, we don't think of him as a moral hero. We're not naming boulevards, and we're not building statues. Why? Because he changed the world by doing what? By making money. By making money. That's not acceptable. You can make the world a better place, but making money at the same time, that's not acceptable. When does Bill Gates become kind of a good guy? Yeah, when he leaves Microsoft, God forbid you make any money, and he starts giving the money away. Now, how many people will he help giving the money away? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Nowhere near as many as at Microsoft. But now we think it's good because he's not being selfish. He's not making money. He's not, and he might not be enjoying himself quite as much. He's not having as much fun. That's good. Now, he's still not saint material. What would make him saint material? How do we make him a saint? He'd give away everything. He lives in a big, nice house. Maybe he'd have to live in a tent. And if he could bleed a little bit for us. Right? Have you ever seen a painting or sculpture of a saint with a smile on their face? No, the whole point of the moral code that we believe in is that suffering is virtuous. Self-sacrifice is good. Being selfless is the ideal. And that's not compatible with business. That's not compatible with capitalism. That's not compatible with a successful society. That's a fact. Bill Gates makes the world a better place much more if he stays in business than he ever goes into charity. I'm not against charity. Charity's fine. But charity doesn't change the world. No philanthropist has ever changed the world. He makes the world a little bit better. But to make the world a lot better, to do this, right, in terms of wealth, that takes business. That takes profit. That takes entrepreneurs. So one has to ask a fundamental question. Why be selfless? Why live for other people? Why are other people's life more important than mine? Why is other people's happiness important but mine is not? Why should I sacrifice myself for the sake of other people? Why should I be selfless? And nobody ever provides the answer. The only answer I know of for that question is because. You were told so. By your mother, by your preacher, by your philosopher. What's the reason I should live for somebody else? I have one shot at this life. One opportunity to live this life. Why not live it? Why not make the most of it? And then think about what is in my self-interest. Because we are taught that self-interest means lying, stealing, and cheating, right? We're taught that self-interest means all these ugly things. But in reality, self-interest actually means producing, creating, trading. Are those bad things or good things? Those are what cause all this wealth. I don't see how they're bad things. The reason I believe that the world is drifting away from capitalism is because we have an ethical system that is consistent with socialism, not with capitalism. I think what Ayn Rand presents us with, fundamentally in books like Atlas Shrugged and in other writings, is a new moral code, a morality of self-interest, a morality of rational self-interest, a morality of using your mind in pursuit of your values, free of coercion, free from force, so that you as an individual can be as creative and as productive as you have the potential to be. What is the fundamental human activity that creates all values? Thinking. Thinking. It's using our mind. There is no value, there's nothing that human beings have created, have made, that does not involve thinking. There's no success that you're going to get by following your emotions rather than by thinking. You can't turn a dream into a reality without having a plan, a strategy, and clear execution goals, which all involve thinking. Everything that we have. We're not like other animals. We're not born with the genetic material to tell us how to produce and how to create and how to make and how to live a good life. We don't have it. Right? Anybody have the gene for making clothes? I don't know how clothes are made. I have no idea. I go to the shop and I buy them. And ancient people, how did they discover clothes? They were just born with clothes on them? How did they figure it out? Somebody, some genius, some Einstein of his day, had to figure out how to take animal skin, dry it, shape it, and turn it into something that you could wear. Now that is an achievement of human reason. That's not just something that happens. It's something that somebody had to figure out. Think about agriculture. How do you get agriculture? Somebody has to figure out that when you drop a seed and water it, the thing that grows up, those are all causally related. It took human beings about, let's say humanity is 100,000 years in our current form, about 100,000, 200,000 years. We only discovered agriculture 10,000 years ago. So it took about 90,000 years to figure that one thing out. And then some entrepreneur had to figure out, a businessman of his time, the Steve Jobs or the Bill Gates of his time, had to figure out how to take that and turn it into an industry called agriculture. None of that is obvious. No, the iPhone is not obvious. Nothing we have today is obvious. Nothing we had today had to be. Somebody had to figure it out. Somebody had to use reason to discover it. Reason is at the core of all human creation, all human achievement. So if you care about your own self-interest, if you care about your own life, if you want to live for yourself, then the thing you cultivate, the thing you invest in, the thing you really think about and figure out is how to use your mind effectively, how to use your brain, how to reason, how to think, how to observe, how to understand the world around you. That is the most important thing that any human being can do, because it is at the core, it's what makes us human. Aristotle called man the rational animal. We are rational. That's our means of survival. That's what differentiates us from all other animals. That's what allows us to create wealth and to live good lives. That's what allows this to happen. Is reason. What's the enemy of thinking? What makes it impossible for people to think? But the thing that makes thinking impossible is coercion, force, a gun at the back of your head that says, if you think in this way, I'm going to shoot you. If you're a scientist 500 years ago, you want to be a scientist, but you know that if you discover truth, you will burn at the stake, then you're not going to discover any truth. Right? You're going to shut your mind down. It's not an accident that the scientific revolution happens when it does. It happens when suddenly people are free to speak and to think. Before that, they're not allowed to. There's dogma. And if you deviate from dogma, if you're lucky in Galileo, you get house arrest. And if you're unlucky, like Bruno, you get burnt at the stake. So force is the enemy of reason. Force is the enemy of thinking. And what is government? What's the essential characteristic of government? Force. Government is all about a gun. Government is all about coercion. The thing that differentiates government from every other human institution is it's the one human institution where we allow them to have force. And now the question is how they use it. When they use it as a coercive means, when they use it in order to impose their will, when they use it in order to impose their authority and impose their views, which is what socialism is or what any form of statism is, then thinking gets compressed, thinking gets destroyed, innovation goes away, economic progress goes away, human flourishing goes away. When government force is used to protect us from people using force on us, from criminals, frauds, crooks, invaders, terrorists, when we are left, in other words, free to think, that's when we get creative, that's when we discover new discoveries, that's when we build and innovate and create, and that's when you get human progress and human success and human flourishing. So if you want the success, if you want the wealth, as an individual, it's think, think, think. And then politically, what you want is the freedom to think and to act on your thoughts.